chapter 1. We're going to spend a little bit of time in Genesis 1 and really just looking at some very foundational things out of the beginning of it all. So if you're in Genesis chapter 1, virtually every version of the Bible begins the same way. Most of them say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So since they begin that way, what I'd like for you to do is think about some implications of that simple statement in verse 1. What comes to your mind when you read that? What could be taught out of that? Or if someone were going to ask you questions about Genesis 1:1, what might you be prepared to say about it? What does it indicate to you? And what lessons are there in just Genesis 1:1? This is one of these times where you get to talk, hopefully more than I do this morning. So if you'd like to join in, go right ahead. Genesis 1:1, what is it saying to you? Yes, sir. Everybody give me just one thing, then we'll kind of move around. There's a creator. Okay. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Yeah, there's a creator. There's no way around that, is there? You can't read Genesis 1:1 and come away with another idea. It is that because that's literally and explicitly what it says. There is a creator. What else? There's a beginning. Okay. That fascinating to me that it's so obvious for us that there's a beginning of things. Okay, keep going. God was there before the beginning. In order for him to do something in the beginning, he had to predate the beginning, right? He had to predate the doing something. And so in Genesis 1:1, at least three things right there, right off the bat, that are really easy for us to understand. Everything was created. There was creation. There was a beginning, and God had to be here before that in order to do that. What else?
Because it's the first verse of His Word, then everything in regards to His Word as it relates to us pivots on these facts that have already been enumerated. If we can't get past that, then we're in trouble spiritually.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If we're struggling with the three things that we've already mentioned, that things were created, and that there was a beginning, and that God predated the creation and the beginning discussed here, if we can't accept that, then we're going to have trouble with the rest of the text. In fact, the rest of the text won't amount to anything. Have you ever thought about it like that? That your whole understanding of spiritual things, right now today, wherever you are, whether you're advanced in your Bible study and knowledge, or whether you're just beginning to understand details of the text, everything about it hinges on this. Because if we don't get this, the rest of it doesn't matter. If you cannot generate faith in this, then we have major issues. Now, are these concepts that we've already discussed, the three that you've already pointed out, are they found in other places in the text as well? Are they re-emphasized over and over again? Well, surely they are. But here, simply stated, we can get at least those three things. Anything else out of the verse? Okay, it does speak to power, doesn't it? It speaks to capability. In the beginning, God created. Well, what did He create? The heavens and the earth. As you read through that, you understand that those are very generic descriptions of what was created. But in their generic or general description, they are also extremely comprehensive. He created everything there is. Anything that exists on earth, anything that exists other than earth. You ever thought about it that way? It's not that He made the earth and the sky. It's that He made the earth and everything else that exists other than the earth. And that speaks to power, capability. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fantastic comment. Kay's talking about how this is representing the physical. It's talking about the physical was made, but God has existed and did exist absent the physical. He existed in what we might refer to as the spiritual realm. And so the rest of the text really is talking about how we in the physical realm relate to the spiritual realm and the battle that goes on between the two. That's just wonderful and really insightful. When you think about the the physical being created but not existing before the beginning, that creates more questions than answers, at least in my mind, right? I mean, when you have God existing, there are some questions that naturally follow. Because if I tell you I made something, if I say I made something, there are several questions that you can ask that are very relevant to that. You can ask, what is it? Out of what is it made? You can ask, where does it reside? Where is it physically? All those kinds of questions we ask. When it comes to God existing prior to in the beginning, we can't answer those questions, can we? We're not equipped to answer the how, the form, if you will. We can get bits and pieces of that, but we'll talk here in a moment about the Spirit of God, so we can get bits and pieces of it. We certainly can't get location out of it, can we? But think about this. Every single thing you know about, whether it's a tree, the vehicle you drove here in today, every single thing you know about has a location, right? Has a physical location. That's the nature of it being physical. That's the nature of it having been created. It will exist in heaven or on earth. It will either be in the expanse of the universe or it will be on the earth itself. Everything created has a location. And so when you talk about God being separate from His creation, it's really hard for us because, and I know you've thought through this before, but I just want us to go over it because maybe some of the younger folks haven't really considered all this. Because when you're creating something, you exist separate from it, right? I mean, if you're going to go out in your shop and weld something, you exist separate from the thing you're creating. And that's the way God is with this creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He exists separate from the heavens and the earth. He does not depend on the heavens and the earth. He's not sustained by the heavens and the earth. Man, that's a hard one for us because we've never even been in a situation where that sort of thing could occur. There is nothing from which we are separate in the heavens and on earth. We're connected to all of it. Whether it's a star light years away or something in our galaxy or something in our solar system or something in our home, we have this connection to it because we exist in the same realm, the same space-time continuum that it is in. God's separate from all that. And that is just so big. I know it's a simple statement, but it's so big when you begin to think about it because what it does for us is it places God where He really ought to be in our minds. And that helps keep us from going, yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not sure about all that. When we realize who He is and what He's done, that He created, we'll get to the means by which He created it in just a moment. We referenced that it speaks to the power of God, but the means by which He did it, we'll talk about in just a minute. When we get to the point that God can create all of this and exist separate from all of this, and we can't still figure out all of this, then we begin to realize who He is and who we are. That's when we begin to feel kind of small in it all. I like that because that helps me a whole lot. I've mentioned this before. Some of you remember when we had Cannon bring a basketball to services. I know Floyd and Angel do because they're probably wondering why in the world we're bringing a basketball to services. But to their credit, brought a basketball to services. We had Cannon in the back of the auditorium with a basketball. You remember that? And I was up here with a BB. Remember the little BB that you couldn't see? But I was up here with a BB. And we were trying to illustrate the difference in size between the sun and the earth. And that wasn't exact at all. In fact, the BB really needed to be smaller. I just didn't have handy something a whole lot smaller I could put in my pocket. And the distance really didn't work either. Remember me telling you that? Really, the distance was the BB needed to be over by Farmers Bank. You remember that? And the basketball needed to be here and the BB needed to be at Farmers Bank to try to illustrate for us the distance. But the reason we do that kind of thing from time to time is not because it's kind of funny. The reason we do it is because it illustrates for us who God is and who we are and how He can create that sort of thing and exist separate from it, because you've never existed separate from creation. You're a part of creation. So those are some things that come out of verse 1, just verse 1 only. Is there anything else out of verse 1 you want to bring up? Anything else you want to say about verse 1? Do what now? Yeah, Really good point. It does tell us what it isn't. Yeah, we hear a lot today about the Big Bang. It's funny because when I was a kid, and that was just 2 or 3, 4 years ago, it seems like, but when I was a kid, people talked about the Big Bang, and I always thought that that's odd. First of all, if you're going to come up with this massive scientific explanation for the creation of the earth, don't use the word bang. That's not a good word for it. That word, that's in a Batman and Robin episode from the 60s, you know? What are those called? Yeah, pow, wham. What are those called? Onomatopoeias, isn't that what they're called? Yeah. Don't use that when you're talking about something so magnificent. But nonetheless, that's where we are. So the idea of something blew up and therefore all this exists. What's the main first issue you have with that? The very first issue with something blew up and that created this is what? There had to be something. Yeah, I'm not a scientist. But everything I've ever seen blow up, and I've seen a few things blow up, yeah, there was something there to begin with. I've never achieved, in fact, I have a hard time getting order from just about anything, but an explosion never brings about order. It just doesn't. We know that. Years and years ago, on a Sunday evening, when services were canceled, back when we met on Sunday evening, services were canceled one evening because of the snow. And I was out with some guys on Trey's farm, and we had some, it just left me. I had it in my mind. What do you call that stuff you can shoot and it'll explode? Say it out loud. Tannerite. Tannerite. Yeah, we had some tannerite. And if something at a very high velocity hits a bucket of tannerite, it will explode. You can't drop it and make that happen. You can't toss it up in the air. You really can't even shoot it with like a .22, a rimfire rifle or a pistol. It takes high velocity. But if you hit it with a high velocity round, it's going to explode. So we put that in a tree way out on the farm, a big bunch of it, and shot it. And it exploded. It was, still have a video of that. It was huge. And the police department started getting phone calls about what just blew up. You know, funny story, they were actually between the bridges out there with binoculars watching it because they wanted to see what it would do too. It was kind of interesting. No order came out of that. We put it in a dead tree. The dead tree was deader when we got done with it. That's how that works. And all of those kinds of experiences that we have, that anybody see several years ago running around on social media, an episode of somebody putting tannerite in an old refrigerator and exploding it there. Did anybody see that? Please tell me you saw that. You saw that? Yeah. So there's a guy behind a tree at a distance who does the same thing we did out there. And he has tannerite in a refrigerator. We're going somewhere with this. Hang with me. He shoots it, it explodes, and that refrigerator flies by him so fast. What it illustrated, first of all, is the stupidity of what he did, but really what it illustrated is what explosion does. It is the most random thing you can imagine. Zach and I used to watch Mythbusters. They used high-speed cameras so you could see what happens during an explosion. It is so random and so powerful. All of that to say, to Brother Beck's point, this is not an explosion. This is a detailed, orderly creation. It is putting things where things need to be. It is intentionally arranging circumstances so they can be built upon in the next layer or for the next phase. That's what's happening here. There's nothing random about it. And for someone, anyone to say, well, all this exploded and this is what we ended up with, aren't we thankful, is just ridiculous. We know that cannot be so. And yet that becomes the thing that everybody kind of generally accepts. So those are some things out of verse 1. Anything else out of verse 1? Anything at all that you want to, yes, sir?
You mentioned time, Todd, and that, you talk about the example of me creating something, me building something, or making something. That's always one of the questions that arises. Well, how long take to make that? And one of the things that is very hard for us to wrap our minds around, because God is eternal and He predates what He made. It's hard for us to wrap around our minds around that He created time. You mentioned the time-space continuum.
Mm-hmm.
He created the time as well as the physical things that you and I see. And so we really have a difficult, time is irrelevant to Him. That's what Peter gets to in 2 Peter 3. 1,000 years is a day and a day.
Yeah.
But he has, it's not that that's the equation, it's that he created time. And so we have a really, not only do we have a problem with him speaking into existence that which we see and interact with on a daily basis, we really have as big a problem with who he made time as well.
Yeah, the interesting thing about time is you and I cannot even really imagine existing without it. It's like the physical realm. We can't imagine existing without it. We don't have a frame of reference in order to put ourselves somewhere and go, oh, that's what it would be like. We can do that regarding cold weather or hot weather, right? We can say, okay, I remember what August can be like because I have experienced an August. It may be that I haven't experienced an August like some people have, maybe in a desert, but I've seen video of it. I've seen something about it. I've read an account of it. And so I can even, based on what I have experienced, I can imagine what it would be like even in a more extreme circumstance. But I cannot really imagine what it would be like without time. I can tell myself I can, but I really can't because I have no frame of reference, no way to approximate it. I can't do it. That all helps us understand how God is different from us. Right now, how he exists differently than us. Verse 2 says, and it's just more commentary on what he did. Verse 2 says, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. This is the first indication, by the way, in verse 2, that you have something other than just God himself. You have God and God's Spirit. You have an inkling here about what God is composed of or how God does exist. And so you have God creating and you have the Spirit of God moving or brooding or being somehow around or over the creation. And the description of the creation is really interesting. What it gets to is first stages. Remember we talked about process. We talked about this phases, which speaks order and intention. And so what you have is God created the heavens and the earth. Well, in what state did they exist or how were they when they were created? Well, they were created in a formless, ready to go from here format. That's kind of the way God did it. Now, here's an interesting thing that I know, you've considered this, but I want you to think about it again. The way creation unfolds here is not because this is the way God had to do it. The way creation unfolds here is because it happens the way it happens so you and I will understand the processes that God goes through, the logical processes that he goes through. I want you to think about the fact that everything that you and I do, and especially in the spiritual realm, everything you and I do is predicated upon, based upon the processes of creation, of the very beginning. In other words, what you do as a Christian has building blocks, it has stages, it has processes, it has development. It's designed to be that way by God. The world in which we live goes from this to this to this to this. Think about it when you're working off a recipe and putting something together for supper. You have a place where you need to start. If you're going to make, let's just say, if you're going to make gumbo, you're going to need to start with a roux. You don't do that at the end, you do that at the beginning. You understand there are necessary processes in order to get where we want to go. The God of heaven who created all of this, or as we'll read in just a moment, said or spoke it into existence, he doesn't have to go through the process. He goes through the process for our benefit, and he lays out how he does what he does. Because you and I are going to live a life of processes. We are. We're going to live a life of, got to do this, so we can do this, so we can do this, so we can do this. That's how it works. That's how life on earth works. So it shouldn't surprise us that earth is created that way, that God goes through that. Another thing that does for us is it helps us not get hung up over processes when we're involved in processes. Even though they may not be our processes. You know, sometimes we don't like them. When you're in school, what do you want to be? When you're in school, what do you want more than anything? When you're in school, what do you really want? What do you want to be when you're in school? Out of school. You want to be done. I got to get through with this. I got to wrap this up. I mean, people tell me it takes 4 years. I'm going to do it in 3, maybe 2.5. Some of us it takes 12. It doesn't matter. But the idea is we want to do it now. We've got to get this process done. Why do we want to get done with this process? So we can start the next one. We have another process we need to start. And if we're not careful, what you and I will do is we will push through every single thing, impatiently trying to get to the next thing. Instead of saying, wait a minute, in Genesis 1, the Lord gave us kind of a lesson about life by saying there's going to have to be order and process and development. When someone obeys the gospel, becomes a Christian for the first time, they're baptized to wash their sins away. Probably don't know everything in the world they need to know. Probably don't have a good handle on every aspect of the text, as if any of us really do. But they probably don't have all that. But what are they beginning? The process. The new life, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, the new life of Romans chapter 6 and verse 4, and I just looked at the clock and apparently I'm out of time. Romans 6 and verse 4, the new life process begins when you come up out of the water of baptism, remember that? And it's a development. Just like Genesis 1 is a development. It's always developing. But there is a time when it's complete. And that maturation process ends for you and me when we leave this earth. Just like it ended for God when earth was completed. It's fascinating how the process is here, and it is in our lives. Yes, ma'am? That's it. We're practicing Christianity like an attorney practices law or a doctor practices medicine. The process is we never get to a point where we go, okay, I'm here now. There's always something to learn and always new skills to master. Okay, we ran a little bit over, but thank you. We may spend a little more time looking at some of the lessons out of Genesis chapter 1. It's helpful for us to think about God and what God has done. We just got really to verse 1 and maybe a little bit of verse 2, so we'll see about doing that later on. We'll start classes here in just a few minutes.